We've come to Shantideva's chapter that is dedicated exclusively to one affliction, which is anger. Anger as a general category from everything that begins with being slightly inconvenienced, irritated, annoyed, and then incrementally up to the full range of complete raging hatred. And because of anger is considered to be the most radically detrimental klesha that that undermines, completely counteracts and undermines our attempts at practicing bodhicitta, our bodhicitta vow to benefit beings. Basically, to save sentient beings from suffering is the bodhisattva vow, and anger completely pulls the rug out from that vow. It does more than any other vow, even more than greed, because anger alienates us from others. Greed regardless of the negative outcomes of bad behavior from greed, greed still leaves the possibility of being drawn towards others, and the possibility to embrace others. But anger pushes us away from those very beings that we have undertaken to save. So in the outset of the chapter, the first 10 verses of Shantideva's chapter here, and throughout the whole chapter, he leaves no room. There's no wiggle room where it's okay to be angry or okay even to be annoyed. But every opportunity that arises that does spark the path to anger is workable, as long as we recognize that as long as we recognize the harm of being angry. And so throughout these chapters, throughout this chapter, we've been following the commentary that outlines these objects that are objects of our patience. And it's very helpful. It's been very helpful to me. And the intention is to become attuned to all these basically all these targets of patience, things that irritate us. And of course, in the if we elaborate on the 11th verse, then we have these four core issues that we don't want. Pain, we don't want to feel pain, we don't want to feel contempt from others, we don't want to be verbally abused by others, and we don't want to be disgraced. And we don't want those to happen to, we don't want others to do that to our friends and family and those in our circle, those that are kind of in our camp, our tribe. And then the opposite for enemies. We don't have any problem when enemies are suffering or have people going against them, or when they're abused or disgraced. So these are things we don't want. So if we know about these things, that's why it is good to kind of study this, so we know how to identify reactions we have to even small circumstances, and then be able to target it as an object of patience. We'll never be able to be patient with our main problem, like the group of things that really cause us to heat up in anger. We'll never be able to deal with those unless we start with small things. We need to get used to what it is to be irritated and then apply patience to that and see it dissolve and become more and more familiar with that process of neutralizing or antidoting patience, antidoting anger. And again, how Shantideva presents this is there's these cultivating patience with regard to things we don't want, and cultivating patience towards things that prevent us from getting what we want. Those are kind of two main categories here. And the method is a threefold method that he introduces here, and we are working with these three. He elaborates on these three in regards to the first category, which is what we don't want, which is that which causes us to suffer. Pain irritates us. And so through these three methods of first accepting suffering, and then secondly, examining the nature of becoming what's called certain regarding the nature of the ultimate nature. And then the third method is to, 54, there's 8 or 10 verses on how to basically create a context where it's not that big of a deal, to make kind of light of what we don't want. And so we've covered those, and then we also have covered where we just finished. Where are we? We just covered on the patience towards those who have contempt for us, treat us with contempt. We just finished that, and then the next one is the third method, the third thing that we train in patience. And here, patience, the term could be forbearance. Sometimes it's just putting up, learning how to put up with something without becoming angry. The whole, as part of the Bodhisattva path, of course, we have this vow to protect. And as we mentioned, and anger is the most threatening emotion, most threatening feeling that to that vow. And of course, that vow, the underpinning of our vow is a concern for the suffering of sentient beings, and how our path is one of striving for to achieve a state of awakening to our pure nature, in order to be able to better serve sentient beings and relieve them of their temporary suffering, and lead them to ultimate liberation from all suffering, to their ultimate enlightenment. And so in order to cultivate the power of that compassion, the sustainability, the durability of our compassion, then when we arrive at a point of forbearance or patience, then we are able to give rise to compassion. Because certainly compassion and anger are mutually exclusive. They contradict one another. So the next section in the category of patience with regard to what we don't want is we don't want our loved ones, our friends, and those that we are close to, or that, like I say, are in our sort of group, in our kind of tribe, that we don't, that we cultivate patience towards those who mistreat those who we love. And this begins on the 64th verse. And there it says, even those who vilify and undermine the sacred doctrine, images and stupas are not proper objects of our anger. Buddhas are themselves untouched thereby, says. So this has to do with, like if we're Buddhists, we're on the Bodhisattva path, and so there are those who have a sectarian hatred, and who want to destroy the Dharma, want to destroy the practitioners of the Dharma, images and stupas, and of course in the teachings on karma, we know that to destroy like stupas or images of a Buddha, or to draw the blood of a Buddha, or to intentionally cause the Sangha to to, to separate, to divide up, that the karma of that immediately causes rebirth in a suffering state without even any bardo, without any transition, just immediately it's called. And so, of course, the karma of that is very grave. And we know throughout history, even we as who happen, maybe are involved in Buddhism as it was practiced in Tibet, have kind of inherited the whole body of our teachers and the teachers themselves and the teachings because of persecution of Buddhism in Tibet. And it happened, in the 50s during our time, and it also happened previous times where hordes rampaged through Tibet, destroying and killing practitioners and temples and so forth. But from this point of view here, from the Bodhisattva point of view, he says they're not proper objects, or they're not to be considered objects for our anger, or they're only, we should feel compassion for them, knowing the outcomes of their negative actions. The effects of their actions are laden with suffering, and so when we hear about these kinds of things, or when we experience them, then we should train in forbearance and patience and give rise to compassion for the actors, for those who are involved in this sort of bad behavior. And then the next verse says, and even if our teachers, relatives, and friends are now the object of aggression, that is, even if our teachers, here's just our instructors and relatives and friends and so forth, are criticized or robbed or harmed in any way, then this, he says here, this all derives from factors, as we have explained. This we should perceive and curb our wrath. So basically we should recollect at this point, at that point, when we hear that or know that our friends have been the object of attack or aggression, we should recollect how everything depends on other things. And those things also depend on other things. That everything arises through a confluence of conditions that are what we call an endless regression of foregoing causes. There's always a cause, which it in itself has a cause, which it in itself has a cause. And it's an endless, that's why we say samsara is beginningless. And so all these factors are continually coming together and disassembling. So we should again reflect on what Shantideva mentioned earlier here somewhere. Verse 31, where all things then depend on other things, and these likewise depend. They are not independent. Knowing this, we will not be annoyed at things that are like magical appearances. So, like this way, we should curb our wrath and calm down about these things, and again, cultivate compassion for those who are causing their own suffering. As in the previous verse where the Buddhas may be harmed, Buddhas may be slandered or criticized or imprisoned or tortured, and Buddhas Buddhas are uncompounded by nature, and the Buddha is not going to be harmed by rumors and vicious gossip and criticism. It doesn't affect a Buddha. Then in 66, beings suffer alike from lifeless things as well as living beings, so why be angry only with the latter? Rather, let us simply bear with harm. So inevitably, beings will suffer. That's just the nature of life. And they'll suffer from lifeless things, meaning like from fire, from water, from wind, from, what's the other one? Earthquakes, landslides, inanimate causes we suffer from, and from living beings, from others. You know, for people and for practitioners, our biggest problem is other people. It's always people's biggest problem is other people. That's well known. But we suffer from other people, and we suffer from lifeless things here, the elements, usually something to do with the elements. But here he's saying, why be angry only with the latter? That is to say, why are we so particularly angry towards sentient beings? Rather, let us simply bear with harm, whether it's from the animate sphere or from the inanimate sphere. They're the same in that they are both bound by conditions, and they both lack any self-identity. So reflecting on these truths, then we should bear with it, whether it's from the kind of equalize animate and inanimate causes of suffering, because fundamentally there's no difference. The elements and the actions of sentient beings are all conditioned. It's all just circumstances coming together and separating. So it's the same with the elements. Some do evil things because of ignorance, and some respond with anger, being ignorant. Which of them is faultless in such acts? To whom shall error be ascribed? So here we should reflect on that the source of negative actions, the source of someone who harms you and your group, your friends, your race, or your religion. They do that because of ignorance. And when you react angrily, why do you react angrily? Is also because of ignorance. When we retaliate, that's not compassion. And so, and both we as who react and want to retaliate or harbor ill will towards a harm doer, and the harm doer are both basically in the same boat, karmically. We're both creating negative actions. We're both acting out of some form of anger. And we both accumulate a kind of karma that causes suffering. Nobody gets saved in that conundrum. Then Shantideva then suggests that we reflect on how it is that harm arises to people that we like, and that everything has a cause. When we apply the teachings that we have learned about karma and the infallibility of cause and effect, then if suffering arises, then it has a cause, and that cause is something to do with negative motivation, anger, greed, pride, jealousy, envy, these one or another sort of negative motivation. And the result of negative actions are one or another form of suffering, interdependent with the intensity of the motivation, not necessarily the act. The act plays a role in how the effect of an action turns out, but it plays a minor role compared to the effect that the intention of the act applies. And as we mentioned, the most destructive motivation for an action is anger. And so when we see that our friends or others that we're close to are experiencing abuse from others, then, as Shantideva says, instead, why did they act in times gone by that they are now so harmed at others' hands? Actions, like people are experiencing harmful actions, it just doesn't come out of nowhere. Karma is infallible. And another principle of karma is that an action is only experienced by the effect of an action can only be experienced by the performer of an action. It doesn't transfer. So since everything depends on karma, he says, why should I be angry at such things? Why be resentful at harm doers when it's just the karma, the effects of karma kind of being summoned by our friends? The effects of negative actions, when all of the conditions come together, they can't be averted. The effects cannot be averted. Just like if you put a seed in the ground, if all the conditions are there, then that seed will sprout. So when someone is harmed in that way, then all those conditions must have come together, both the cause, which was their negative actions in the past, and the conditions, the present conditions. So reflecting on karma should free us from directing our anger at harm doers, and then we can feel compassion both for the harm doer and those that are harmed. Even our compassion for the harm doer can be even greater when we understand how karma works. I think it was in one, I won't give any names because I'm not 100% certain, but in one monastery, the monks in Tibet, the monks, they caught one man, hunter, who was on their property, or I don't know property, but anyway, they caught this fellow in the woods who shot a deer to get the gland. There's one gland behind the ear of a deer that has this very valuable stuff. It's a very valuable stuff that's used to make incense, and you have to kill the deer to get it. And they caught him, and then they brought him back to the monastery, and they were kind of whipping him with their zens, you know, and scolding them. And then the Kempo, he went, what happened? They told him what he was doing, and he says, "Oh, you're misplaced. Your compassion is misplaced, or you shouldn't be angry at him. You should feel compassion for him more than for the deer. The deer died through the playing out of karma. Here, somebody who's making new karma, and will have to experience karma." Another principle of karma is its proliferating effect, that the result of an action is greater than its cause. So the small act of killing out of, in that case, a desire, the suffering will be much greater than the suffering that was caused by the negative act. Just like a spark as a cause, and a forest fire as an effect. A small act has a big result. We know so many instances, I'm sure, of just a small act of generosity, a small act of kindness, even a smile, and somebody's whole day is changed, maybe even their life. And so when we hear, when our friends become afflicted by the abuse of others, aggression of others, or bad words, or what have you, then reflect on the harm doer. The suffering that they will experience will be much worse than what they caused our friends, and have compassion for everybody. This I see, and therefore, come what may, I'll hold fast to the virtuous path and foster in the hearts of all an attitude of mutual love. So by reflecting on this, reflecting on the laws of karma and our Bodhisattva vow, then and understanding the significance of that, then come what may, no matter what happens, I'll not be angry or resentful when others harm my friends or others, and I'll cultivate a kindness and compassion, the virtuous path. I'll hold fast to the virtuous path, as we said earlier. Patience, practice of patience, is the most virtuous act. So the path of patience is virtuous, and we need to hold fast to that. by applying our understanding. That's how we cultivate patience, is by applying our understanding. And then, if possible, we can apply that or foster in the hearts of all an attitude of mutual love. In other words, if possibly even healing a relationship between your friend and their enemy, or just either through your compassion and the power of your compassion, that anger will be eliminated. So that's the Bodhisattva conduct. So how do we, so then, no, the building is okay. So then Shantideva here gives an example of how to pacify our resentment when this happens, or so that anger is not aroused. How can we do that? One way here is, he uses an example. Now, when a building is ablaze and flames leap out from house to house, the wise course is to take and fling away the straw and anything that spreads the fire. So it would make sense to take away things that are flammable, that are of less importance, so that those things that are important won't be fueled by those things that are less important. See? Straw and anything, I don't know. And then, as an example, then he says, and so likewise then, in fear that merit might be all consumed. In other words, understanding the vulnerability and the fragileness of our virtue and merit, that hatred spreading from our friends to us. You know, our friends get angry at being, towards their enemy, and that can spread to us. And here, like it says in the first verse, the kind of this tough verse there, the first verse, that all your virtue of thousands of eons can be ruined in one moment of anger. So understanding the threat of anger, then we should at once, he says, cast far away our mind's attachments. So we have to turn away from our clinging and our attachment to one side, to our friend's side, because it just causes hatred to spread and will consume any virtue we have that would enable us to have the integrity and the influence over others in a positive way. We'll ruin that by being consumed by other people's anger, our friends' anger. It's here's another metaphor. It is not a happy chance if one condemned. It's not a happy chance if, when condemned to death, a man is freed, its hand cut off, and ransomed for his life. And it is not a happy chance if now, to escape hell, I suffer only the misfortunes of the human state. It's not a happy chance. So the meaning here is that we may be criticized or banished or harmed if we don't get angry when our group or our friend gets attacked. But here he's saying that just like someone who's condemned to death, but then instead of dying, instead of being killed, he just gets his hand cut off. Of course, this was, I guess, the early day. This was back in the you know, the great, the good old days when if you stole something, well, the obvious punishment would be you should cut your hand off so you won't do it again, because it's not a very good thing to do. And to keep you from stealing, then they cut your hand off, and so forth with the other things. But if you know, if you've killed someone and you're condemned to death, and then just like if you are going to get the death penalty, but then they give you a life sentence, a life sentence, and then most life sentences, then you can get out in 8 years. You can apply and see. So that's better than dying. And so here he's saying just like that, then being kind of condemned and ostracized possibly from your friends, that's better than suffering the misfortunes of you being bereft, your karma, your virtue and merit being consumed by anger, to say nothing of the loss of your bodhisattva vow. Even these my present pains in other words, my present pains, meaning those that are inflicted on me and my friends by enemies, are now beyond my strength to bear. If it's intolerable for me to bear these, then why do I not cast off my anger, cause of future sorrows in infernal torment? So if we think that this is the human, the present pains of being hit or insulted or disregarded or all the things that we don't want, if we can't bear that, then how much more will it be difficult to bear the consequences, the effects of the karma of being angry at that? So we need to restrain our anger, and our friends, encourage our friends to restrain their anger, because it just will cause future sorrows and infernal torment. In other words, something that will really be intolerable. Rinpoche always cautioned or advised how one of the benefits of a human birth is that our karma, very heavy karma, can be experienced as a human, that if it was in another rebirth, less than human, it would be very difficult to bear. But sometimes a very great negative action can just, as a human, be experienced as like a headache, where in another circumstance, non-human circumstance, that same act, that same karma, because of the change, because of the different configuration of the conditions, it could be experienced as just getting pounded on the head with a club over and over. So if we think our human state of suffering from our enemies is intolerable and unwanted, then, as he says in the next verse, for sake of gaining all that I desired at 1,000 times I underwent the tortures of the realms of hell, achieving nothing for myself and others. So I've spent thousands of times, basically since beginningless samsara, I've been seeking out the objects of my attachment. My mind functions through projecting objects that it then seeks out to gain, to find satisfaction and happiness. And those objects that interfere with that, we have hatred for, kleshas. We have an aversion for that, anything that undermines our attempt at happiness. And so we've been doing that again and again and undergoing all sorts of trouble in the different realms in order to achieve our satisfaction. But here we are with, throughout it all, there's really no purpose that's ever been achieved. All of our suffering up to now has been pointless. So here, when we do experience the effects of karma that cause us or our friends, as this section is pointing to, suffering, then we can actually endure that suffering and give it meaning by finding patience and forbearance and strength of character and love and compassion in that very experience. Then our suffering finally will have some purpose. The present aches and pains are nothing compared with those, and yet great benefit will come from them. As we said, we can make our aches meaningful. These troubles that dispel the pain of wanderers, meaning those sentient beings all we sentient beings who aimlessly wander in samsara, these troubles that dispel the pain of wanderers, it's only right that I rejoice in them. So all these troubles that come to me, then I should basically lighten up and rejoice, because I can put these problems, I can put these forms of suffering and failure, I can put it all to use through the cultivating patience in the face of getting what I don't want. So that section has to do with patience towards those who ill-treat our loved ones, which is the third heading of cultivating patience with regard to what we don't want, as I mentioned. We don't want what brings us suffering. We don't want to be treated with contempt. We don't want our loved ones to be ill-treated. Then, conversely, the object of our patience is when others do good to those who we don't like, or those that we're jealous of, or those who are envious, or that we are envious of, or our enemies, or our groups, our tribes' enemies. When we notice our reaction, when, say, our enemy becomes praised, then that reaction we have when our enemy is praised is our object of patience. So that's what this section relates to, this fourth object of patience. When others take delight in giving praise to those endowed with talents. Why, O mind, do you not find a joy likewise in praising them? So people here, he's saying that why don't we also rejoice when someone rejoices someone else? When I think also this section, although we should try to capture the intention of it and apply it to our experience, some of these verses you can see are directed to monks and nuns, basically ordained people ordained people. That you can see that as what would happen. But I'm sure in our workplace, and certainly when we are, well, maybe not little kids, but it starts when you're a little kid. How if your parents treat your sibling slightly, you perceive a slight better treatment for doing the same thing to them, and you that kind of thing also, and then it continues, you know, in how they got a better chair. When everybody got upgraded chairs, but I didn't get a chair. So they got a raise and these kind of things. And people are honored and praised for doing good work, and you might have tried your best and so forth. Like these kind of things, I'm sure that you can, if you reflect on these verses, you'll come up with your own personalized version of how you struggle with sharing in the joy that someone feels for someone who has been successful when it's not you. When others take delight, when others feel gratified when they give praise to those who are endowed with talents, particularly those who we don't like, or those who have mistreated us, or those who we are envious or jealous of, or those who have secretly behind people's backs kind of stabbed you in the back, and now they're being praised. So why don't we also take joy in praising them? What's wrong with us? Resentment is really out of place. Being resentful and not rejoicing is really out of place. As a bodhisattva, any success someone has is a source of our joy. We should rejoice and rejoice in others' happiness. The pleasure that is gained therefrom itself gives rise to blameless happiness. It's urged on us by all the holy ones and is the perfect way of winning others. Okay, so there's, so when we, in the sutras, I think this also urged on us by the holy ones. In the sutras, there are mentions of that the greatest happiness is when someone can wholeheartedly rejoice in the success of their enemies, those that you don't like. If you can rejoice, and maybe you've experienced this, because everyone here is, you know, kind of basically a good person, and so maybe you've tried to kind of get on board with rejoicing in someone else's happiness that you have kind of long-standing issues with, maybe, or something. But that kind of action, that kind of rejoicing, produces a happiness that's quite different than sense satisfaction, sensory accomplishing sense pleasures. It's a different kind of, much more kind of more beautiful virtue It's a beautiful kind of happiness. And when you do, and when you are able to rejoice in those who have mistreated you, then it does give rise to what's called blameless happiness in this life and in future lives. And the Buddhas have taught it, as I mentioned. It's not a negative thing, but it's a virtuous thing. It's virtuous. Things occur through conditions, circumstances. They don't exist in and of themselves. Someone else's actions, basically, no one is there is no being in our enemies, or there's no being in our entities that is enemies, that is acting harmful to us. There's nobody there. It's just the assemblage and the aggregation of conditions. Everything's conditional. But you may say, let's see here. But you say, okay, but they're the ones who will have happiness. But they're the ones who will have the happiness, you say. If this then is a joy you would resent, abandon paying wages and returning favors, you'll be the loser both in this life and the next. This was tricky. So when others are happy when they're praising your enemies, you might think, well, I don't want to be happy praising my enemies. That's not the kind of happiness I want, you think. But here he says, when someone, then the logic would be then, you don't want someone to be happy praising your enemies, then if you don't pay wages and return favors, because you don't want to make other people happy, basically, then you'll be adversely affected, both in this life. You won't have the benefits of generosity, and it will magnify this negativity, and this irritation that you feel for others will magnify and cause more suffering in the future. So it's useless. When praise is heaped upon your qualities, you're keen that others should be pleased thereby. You want everybody to join in. The more people that join in and applauding your success, you want everybody to be happy. But when the compliment is paid to others, particularly your enemy, somebody that you don't like or who's against you, you feel no inclination to rejoice as well. So you don't want to join in with something that will make your enemies happy. And that's a perverted perception of what to do and what not to do, according to this. That's what he's referring to. You who want the happiness of beings have wished to be enlightened for their sake. Attaining enlightenment, as we may know now, after so many years of studying the Dharma, enlightenment is rigorous, and it's hard won, seems like. But we're undergoing all the rigors of the path of awakening for the sake of others, for the happiness of others, their temporary happiness and their ultimate happiness. That's why we want to become enlightened. not just for our own sake. So when others are happy, why should we have a problem with that? So why resent? Why should others irk you when they find some pleasure for themselves? So it's kind of inappropriate to be annoyed at others in that way. We shouldn't resent it when others are happy, and when somebody got happy, kind of basically they didn't need our help to be happy. And if you claim to wish that beings be enlightened, honored by the triple world, in other words, you want beings to have all the opportunities and conditions to be able to attain a state of perfect and complete awakening. We aspire for that for others. And upon awakening, then others can be an inspiration to others. Like a Manjushri entering into samsara and taking a being and guiding that being out of the lower realms into the human realms and into then he says he takes them by the hand and leads them to the Bodhi tree and then makes sure they're sitting there and sees that they will surely attain awakening. And then Manjushri turns back again to lead others one by one, all sentient beings. When petty marks of favor come their way, why are you so discomforted? Why are we so put off when someone that irritates us is praised? It's out of place not to accept that and rejoice in what others see. And you don't see their qualities, you only see their flaws. So this is completely inappropriate it's illogical, and it's inappropriate on the Bodhisattva path. We should forbear that and convert it into one of the factors of awakening: generosity, discipline, patience, compassion, and through all of it, through a deepening of our understanding of the Dharma. When dependents who rely on you, to whom you are obliged to give support, find for themselves the means of livelihood, will you not be happy? Will you once again be angry? So that's clear. Then you maybe dependents or children or friends that you're maybe take in, and they can share your food until they get themselves together, till they get their legs under them and get their own ability to support themselves, and you take them in. And so when they do become capable, they do get a job or whatever it is that they need, then you rejoice, don't you? You don't feel irritated by that. In the commentary, actually, is almost, or I don't know if this is where this comes from, but sometimes people get irritated when people no longer rely on them. I don't know, parents maybe, or I don't know, relatives, like if you help, if living in, it might be more like if you're living in an extended family, where somebody decides that they're able now to go off, and they kind of resent that. This, I was in the commentary, it mentioned something like that. We're all about launching others, right? Everybody has to get launched. And 83, even if this you do not want for being, even when small little abilities or small favors or the small success comes to others, how could you want Buddhahood for them? If you can't even deal with someone getting it together or having their own capacity or being praised, how could you want Buddhahood for them? How can anyone have bodhicitta who's angry when another prospers, says. This has to do with, like in these 4 things, pain, contempt, verbal, or like say success and failure. We sort of have this either overt or underlying hope that our enemies, those that we don't like, will fail. So, or they'll be, fail. And so here, we should counsel ourselves and develop bodhicitta and see how these are the people I want to bring to enlightenment. Enlightenment is a bliss. So here's just a small little bounce of joy that somebody, maybe a little self-satisfaction or a little encouragement somebody's receiving. So I should rejoice with them. I shouldn't go against that with jealousy or resentment. Here also it mentions how, monks and nuns can be very this way about somebody getting a little bit, maybe more, have a sponsor that supports them, or things like that. If someone else receives a gift, meaning instead of you, or if that gift stays in the benefactor's house, or if someone else receives it, or it doesn't, or the person who gave it doesn't give it and keeps it, in neither case will it be yours. So given or withheld, why is it your concern? So here, this also has to do with like rivals. So here we should be kind of indifferent to what happened, to that circumstance. All your merit and the faith of others, all your sterling qualities, why throw them all away? Not holding on to what might bring you riches, tell me why you are not angry at yourself. So when we have that jealousy for others' success in that way, it's because they had, of course here it has to do with patronage. It says in the commentaries how, well, someone has become an object of veneration to a patron. And of course, this can also apply in the workplace, perhaps. People out there, everybody kind of has favorites sometimes. And that's just the playing out of merit, virtue, the merit from the past. And so here we say, why shouldn't you be angry at yourself? Meaning, you should be engaging in the causes that bring about your own prosperity, which is virtue, which is, In the case of Dharma, it means a deep learning, a proper application of the Dharma. That's what you should be concerned about. So like he's saying here, you should get angry at yourself when you feel that your rival has been is the favorite of somebody. Not only do you feel no sorrow for the evils you have done, you even wish to match yourself with those whose merit has been earned. Okay, so like that. So we should look at our own mind. Any flourishing or any success or prosperity or praise or upgrading that others experience, it's through their virtue, through their karma maturing. And so rather than creating your own negative karma, which is going to take you further away from your own prosperity, then you should tell yourself that you need to apply yourself to the path of awakening in a continuous way. So like that. This is all to do with being patient towards enemies. And as I mentioned, there's these three ways that Shantideva expects us to reflect on these categories, these patience with regard to what brings us suffering, patience towards those who treat us with contempt, patience towards those who ill-treat our loved ones, and patience towards people who do good to those that we don't like. And if you study these objects of patience, you'd be surprised. In my own experience, just lately, I'm just noticing all these things. That's very interesting how we overlook so much judgment about others because we don't notice that judgment causes us just this little bounce or little bubble of anger. Especially now, with how everybody has different opinions about like a pandemic, for instance. And different, masks and how you feel when you see people that don't wear masks, how you feel when you see people that do wear masks, and this one, all these things. That's very helpful here. I had a field day in the airport, when I saw all kinds of different people relating to masks on the nose, under the chin, not at all, totally packed, every chair filled, waiting for delayed flights and everything. And it was like a field day of practice. Like I could just see my mind just going boom, boom. Although I wouldn't have, if I didn't have reviewed these things and had some background, to know, I wouldn't have thought of anything. I wouldn't have, I would have just kind of just absentmindedly said some mantras or something just to pass the time. But that was quite a field day of practice. Because and so Shantideva, there's three things, right? How to accept suffering. That's like in the first, the 12th to the 21st chapter, I'll put it on record. Okay, the 12th to the 21st chapter is how to accept suffering. The same teachings there we can reflect on, and how to accept having someone contempt for you. The same accepting others, our friends being objects of others' contempt, and the same with our enemies being praised. Like this one is accepting suffering teaching. And then the second, which is probably the most, I don't know, it's the most important maybe, it has to do with reality, the nature of reality. And apply that to all these, to these other four categories. Those who treat us with contempt, those who treat our friends with contempt, and patience for those who treat our enemies well. Yeah? And then the third is making light of, or putting it into a context so that it's not so illogical to be angry. So those points basically we can kind of narrow it down to certain points here, because we've come to the end of this of the first of two. Outlines are. I could send you this outline. It took a long time to figure out just what that outline meant. But in other words, in cultivating patience, there's two areas. One is with regard to what we don't want, and two is towards those obstacles that prevent us from getting what we do want. So we just came to the end of the first one. Okay? What we don't want, which was suffering, not wanting our friends to suffer, not wanting to be treated with contempt, and not wanting our enemies to get all the things that we want, to be successful. Those four things. So this one is accepting suffering, then the ultimate nature, coming to terms with the ultimate nature, and then three, making light. You can apply those to all of them, and that basically constitutes the first, 50 verses. You can apply those 50 verses to the rest of this up to where we are now. This idea of the ultimate nature, I think, for us, our sort of, not necessarily our education, but I always think of us as being sort of post-Einsteinian, in the age of post-Einsteinian, where interdependence and relativity are kind of a little bit more ingrained, and the idea of identitylessness is a little bit less frightening because of our makeup. I don't know what it, some word, but there's some points I have to understand here. One is that others are motivated, and again, here, this is when we're harmed, we need to understand certain things. Because Dharma is the antidote to suffering. Maybe that's the first and overriding idea. We have to believe that applying the Dharma antidotes suffering. That's its purpose. One here is that others are motivated impersonally by conditions outside themselves, outside of them. Others are motivated by conditions that are not there in them. They're just coincidental. Anger, others' anger. we should understand that nothing comes into existence on its own. Nothing has the ability to come into existence through its own self-will. Everything is conditioned. So we should reflect on that towards others. Aggression, hatred, anger, suffering inflicted by others. And you can find the relevant verses in there. And there's all these, like, people, we all just function in an ever-moving aggregation of causes and conditions. There's nothing actually there that actually does something. Everything is just causes and conditions. And the totality of that, we can think, well, even my body is just composed of parts. But if you take all those parts, then that's a body. The totality of conditions have no independent, autonomous existence. If you burn one light, then it throws off a certain amount of illumination. If you burn 100 lights, then each one is sending off its own illumination. But at no time does all of that illumination create a total of an illumination. It's always conditioned by each individual candle. Like that illumination didn't come into being. It's all conditional. It doesn't have its own independent existence. Therefore, no suffering we experience is a result of the volition of any discrete entity. Any suffering we experience at the hands of another, we can't say that there has ever been the case where any person ever harmed us. Everything is like an illusion, therefore. And illusions are not responsible for their own functioning. People are not responsible for their own functioning. Like we say, people have, the biggest problem people have is other people. Well, people aren't responsible. Responsible meaning not that that there's no karma that they'll experience, but they're not, there's no one there who is taking the responsibility. Everything is an assemblage of conditions. And therefore, from our point of view then, we are free to make conditions now. Like we could say, well, that's what the Dharma does. The Dharma, if you can get a hold of the Dharma, then at the point, there's a point of the effect of a karma, or let's say a point when we are suffering, where there is a space where we can apply the Dharma to overcome or avoid future suffering. When something lands in our lap, it lands in our lap. It's too late. You can't turn time backwards. But if you have the Dharma at your disposal, then when that suffering lands in your lap, you know how to, or you have the tools that will enable you to prevent that from continuing from reoccurring again and again in the future through changing the conditions. Just like if you have a lamp and you know the wind is blowing, you can, and so the sort of from the point of view of inanimate elements, the karma, the actions, causes and conditions of the elements, like when the wind blows, then that blows fire out, if it's a small one. So the Dharma is like a person that can put their hands around a flame in the event of a wind that blows and protect the flame from blowing out. It's like we intervene in the natural course of things. And so that's what the Dharma does. It intervenes, it changes the circumstance, not of our immediacy of our suffering, but how we experience suffering. And we can experience suffering in such a way that it becomes less or becomes a powerful means to prevent future suffering. And that the effect of that will be that we will be able to deal with the aggression of other people. That's just in the natural course of things. We'll be able to, certainly we'll be able to deal with other people. And other people won't be the problem that they are when you don't have that freedom to act according to the Dharma. Just like if you have a disease back in the old days and there was no doctors. And so you just were at the mercy of a disease. And so here, anger, it's such a dominant part of life, particularly, I don't know, particularly anything, particularly in the hell realms. I was going to say people, but it's, we do have it cycles. But it is, like mentioned earlier, it is the most contradictory klesha. And as Shantideva here, he's not allowing us to have any toehold on it at all. Toehold? Yeah, he's not allowing any sort of righteous anger, nothing like that. He won't allow that here. As we can see, he's quite determined that on the Bodhisattva path, that anger is eradicated. Anger is converted, or anger is converted to compassion. That anger is seen to be, the anger's absolute nature is experienced, depending on the practitioner. You know, it's avoided, or you convert it, or you see its nature. And so that's what Shantideva is inviting us to do here with all these teachings that help us to give us something to reflect on and to learn. Okay? So we're not done. Next time, now we go on to those objects of patience that are about not getting what we want. Things that cause us to not get what we want. We have to be patient with them. Okay. So we'll end and dedicate the merit. All the virtue of this practice and all that is gathered throughout the 3 times I dedicate to all beings without exception, so that they may attain Buddhahood. Following and emulating the omniscient and courageous Manjushri, and likewise Samanthabhadra, I completely dedicate all virtue. Since dedicating merit is praised as supreme by victorious ones of the 3 times, I completely dedicate these roots of virtue for the sake of practicing excellent conduct. May the teachings of Lord Buddha, the only source of benefit and happiness, long remain in this world. May the lives of those who uphold these teachings be as stable as a victory banner. Supreme bodhicitta is so very precious. Where it has not yet arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but evermore grow and flourish. This phrase here, I completely dedicate these roots of virtue for the sake of practicing excellent conduct. Excellent conduct here means bodhisattva conduct. Okay. Next month is February, and we'll have a change of schedule next month. I think you pay attention to the schedule. Offhand, I would say we'll have two sessions next month, but they'll be 1 week apart. I think they'll be the 2nd and the 3rd week of February. The 2nd Wednesday and the 3rd Wednesday we'll have teachings again. Not the 1st and 3rd, but the 2nd and 3rd. I believe that's the case. I can't, my schedule. Okay. Tomorrow we have a Guru Rinpoche Ch6. That's also Dujum Rinpoche's anniversary. So a very good time. It's not according to the moon, but it happens to be also on Dujum Rinpoche's anniversary. Anniversary, in Tibetan style, anniversary means when they pass away from this life. That becomes, when you're alive, you celebrate a birthday. And when you die, then you celebrate the death day. Okay. So, be well. Thank you for the opportunity to hear these teachings myself.
Thank you, Lama Pema.